All right, let's talk about red flags. Let's talk about red flags, my friend. I did you know that I actually hate the conversation of red flags, green flags? I did a whole video on this. I'll link to it up here, but
Why is
I'm
that?
not a big fan. I find that we've gone with red flags, green flags, yellow flags too, right? This whole we talk a lot about them in absolutes. And
Hmm.
I think they're a bit more nuanced. And I mean, for me, there are some red flags. We'll focus on red flags today. We'll do another video, right, on green
Yes.
flags. But
Yes.
there are definitely certain absolutes that, I think it's a red flag for anyone and everyone.
Hmm.
But a lot of
Hmm.
times with flags too, I think we have to be careful to realize that I always talk about the dynamic in relationships and dating.
For
And I
sure.
think we always have to factor that in. But hey, what would you say is your definition of red flag, actually, before we start?
Mm.
Or flags in general?
Well, what I love about what you just said is that they aren't absolute. It's a red flag to you because it
Mhm.
goes against maybe your core fundamentals about a relationship or your values or something. So that's what I like about what you said. And I even, when I'm talking to ladies, I'm like, okay, there might be some very overt and obvious red flags that we all know about. But what might be a red flag for you, your girlfriend might tell you, girl, don't worry about that. That's not a red flag. But if it makes you feel some type of way, I say it makes it feel off to you. You don't even really have to have a reason because your intuition may just say, this feels off to me, or I don't like that. That is your prerogative. That's part of who you are, what makes you up, how you thrive in relationships. So a red flag is very personal. It's what makes you feel like this might not be a situation I should move forward in.
Yeah, I
It's
think there are
such
definitely
a
some
huge
obvious
range,
ones.
you know?
Whenever we go into, when you feel, you know, in a situation where there might be personal harm, physical harm, like
Hmm.
obvious, absolute red flag. For some
Hmm.
people, it might, right, it would be the three A's: abuse, addiction,
Right.
adultery, right? Like those I can see for
Hmm.
sure how someone,
Hmm.
could classify that as an absolute. And
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there too. I came up with my list today of my red
Yeah, and I
flags that
want
I
to,
wanted
the
to
reason,
cover.
I love having this conversation is because so many women will tell me, oh my God, this is such a red flag. And it's these obvious things that it doesn't just call for a pivot. It's like, why are you even having a conversation with this man? But
Yeah.
that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about more of the subtle red flags or the red flags that, I mean, I'm going to hear yours, but what I came up with, they tend to be red flags that people go, it's not that bad.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
So let me hear some of yours. I'm
Well,
curious.
you already mentioned one of mine, and I think like a red flag can be what your intuition is telling you. Right? If your intuition says something's off, and sometimes you can't
Hmm.
even pinpoint it. I work with a lot of women where, for various reasons, right, that internal compass of theirs isn't, you
It's
know,
turned off.
it's turned off, or they don't trust it anymore,
Right.
right? Things have happened and
Right.
they're like
Hmm.
scared, obviously, and they have really good reason. But I always say, like, as soon as, something inside of you, for whatever reason, is sensing something, you want to
Hmm.
listen to that, right?
Hmm.
You want to really investigate what's there, and at least listen to what's going on.
Hmm. And to piggyback on that, I feel like those are some of the red flags that maybe in the past they've had, but maybe it resulted in the man being pushed away or, they were kind of dismissed for having that or, they were making too much of a big deal. And so now they don't trust that. So
Yeah.
they're like, that's not that big a deal. Because I
Yeah.
remember what happened last time.
Yeah, maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of it. Maybe,
Hmm. Hmm.
taking it on for themselves and
Right.
personalizing it there for
Right.
them. So,
And being too emotional.
yeah,
Who
yeah.
told you that? Oh, so we women shouldn't be emotional. I had a client like, I'm being too emotional. And I said, where did you get that from?
Mm.
Where did you start learning you were being too emotional? Now, maybe if you were throwing all the pots and pans because you wanted a sunny day and it's raining, might have to discuss that. But to bring up your own natural concerns in the relationship or something like that, I beg you to, look at that again.
Oh yeah, emotions are our superpowers as women. Like when
Mhm,
we can harness them properly and use them properly, no,
mhm,
we thrive in our emotions and we magnetize and we attract based on our emotions. So
mhm,
like it's a good thing, but like you said, we also have to make sure that we're on top of them and managing them too, and just making sure we know how to use our superpowers, because otherwise,
mhm.
just like that reel you sent me about the
Which
experiment
one?
on IG where the women are throwing the plates there in front of their
Oh,
husbands.
the prank on the husbands where they're gonna serve them their dinner in an aggressive way
Yeah.
to see their response. That was so funny. I was laughing so hard because most of the men all had the same response. Like,
Yeah.
actually, I would have been frightened if some of them, the man was like, like he's used to that.
Good point. Good
But
point.
most of
Yeah.
them were like, what in the world? I loved the ones that actually asked her, what's the matter?
Yeah.
Because when you are moving like that, I mean, you might be passive aggressive, but when you're moving like that and your man's like, I don't even care to know. Ooh, we
Yeah.
got some work to do. But I love that you said intuition. So a
Yeah.
red flag is just them not trusting it.
So I do believe that your intuition is going to catch that red
Show
flag.
them.
It's
Hmm.
going to, I don't want to use
Hmm.
the word trigger because it's just
Hmm.
too many contexts.
Hmm.
But it's going to raise the alarm bells. Your
Yeah.
intuition is going to know what's a red
Yes.
flag for you too. So to really listen to that. So what would be one of
Mhm.
yours? What's one of yours on your list?
I love that. It's like your internal GPS.
Yeah.
Oof. I would say when the woman that, and we're talking about dating, some of these I guess could come up in marriage. I don't know some of the things you might have talked about with women because I'm sure, that's a different video, but the woman that you have to be or are becoming to be with him
Mhm.
directly conflicts with where you said you wanted to go, the type of relationship you wanted to have, just who you want to be. So you find yourself having to tone down, maybe not want the same things. Of course, this opens up a whole boundary conversation that we're not even going to get to because that's something we could talk
A
about
whole
all
other
day.
video.
But you have to be less of, I don't want to be all cliche and say your light has to be dimmed, but whatever your vibe is, your essence, your natural aura, your playfulness, even some of the things that just work towards your expanding feminine energy, you have to do less of that to be with this person. Um, because then it's not even authentic anymore. If he's
Yeah.
only you only feel like you're connecting with him. I don't even want to call it connection, but you guys are thriving more when you are less of who you are. So that to me is a red flag. And we do it sometimes without thinking, especially if we transition into that pick me. Look how
Yeah.
great of a girlfriend I am. Now you're performing and now um, you're almost trying to get a reaction out of him instead of leaning back and seeing how does he treat you naturally. So you're moving to a role play almost. When you are
Mhm.
not being who you need to be and you feel like that makes the relationship work, I'm gonna say it's probably a red flag.
And that's such a slippery slope, that one. That's like a good one to talk about and dive a bit deeper into, because that's something that happens a lot, right? Like I can just think about when after my divorce, I realized, hey, I wasn't being who I was. Like I had to rediscover myself. How many times do you hear women who like
Mhm,
break up and they're like, I have to find myself again. Like I have to
mhm,
rediscover what
Hmm.
my passions are, what my likes are. Like I always share the
Right.
story is like after I divorced and I was just driving in the car one day and I just realized I turned on the radio and I heard the song. I'm like, I hadn't heard it in forever. And that's the kind of music I used to love to listen to. And I wasn't listening to it.
Hmm.
And then I looked at myself, I'm like, I'm already dressing different again. Like, who was I? Like, what happened to
Who's that girl? I
yeah.
totally feel that. A lot of us lose ourselves in the relationship, especially in this dating phase. And I feel like it is because we don't prioritize ourselves anymore. We're
Hmm.
not operating from that place of, let me just be who I am and see what happens. That to me is still part of that be chosen energy instead of I
Yeah.
get to choose also. I'm so focused on being chosen and doing the right thing that I am going to be the perfect girlfriend and show him how great I am when he hasn't even really given you signs that he wants a commitment or he is looking to be in a serious relationship. And you basically are trying to be a walking advertisement. Look how great I am. Look at this. And I have told some of my ladies that I talk to, this is why many times, not often, but you will end up not being able to get what you want out of that relationship or from that man because the dynamic has been created where you're like, ta-da! It's kind of like being on stage waiting for the applause. And I mean, well, I've already seen the show, right? The man's like, I've already seen the show.
Well, I'd
So,
say the distinction there too is that you're doing it for that specific person. Like, I'm all about being the best version of yourself and
yeah.
like, hey, I am amazing. Hello, you know? But
Yes.
when you're conforming to someone's vision, I think
Hmm.
that's really like the red flag portion of it. Because really, when you're just being the best version of yourself, and I love talking about the better offer all the time,
Hmm.
you're doing it because you're living up to your standards and who you
Yes.
want to be. And hey, it might be him that like
Yes.
smartens up and
I
picks you.
love
Or
that
it's going to
term
be,
too that you use when you're talking about the better offer. It's
yeah,
like, I am the better offer, but this is just who I am. I'm
yeah,
like, ooh, this is what he likes. And this is what, no shade to anybody because I have done all of these things, which is why I
same.
can talk about them. Oh, that's what he wants. I'm going to do that. Oh,
Yeah,
that's what he likes me to wear. I'm going to wear that. Oh, he hates
yeah,
my hair long. Let me cut it off. Just a lot of conforming and performing, as I call it, rather than just showing up as you because
yeah,
you're just afraid that that's not good enough. So it's very easy to fall into that chameleon stage of, oh, he likes this. Oh,
yeah.
I love football. No, good and well, you cannot stand the game. Oh my God, so great. And you're like, why does he always want to do this and not, well, you know,
And I notice that
better
often
offer.
comes from a place of, self-worth and needing validation. And that's a whole other video
Mhm.
also in itself, right? You're
It
kind of
is.
needing that to either soothe something inside of you or
Hmm.
to get some sort of reassurance or whatnot. And
Hmm.
that's a red flag if you have to do that from the guy's perspective, and also like a red flag for yourself in terms of, hey, this is something I should be exploring a little bit more, or I could work on even more. So
Hmm. And I feel like the healthy masculinity, they just, you know, I know I'm quite opinionated, but
we love you.
I appreciate that. I feel like healthy masculinity does not need, notice I use the word need you to jump through these hoops
Mm,
because they are coming with this energy of already knowing that they are able to lead, provide, secure, prepare, uplift without feeling like it's taking something away from them. And so they don't, it's why a lot of healthy relationships, or when you're dating and you meet a man, he doesn't really care
mm.
what you do or how much money you make. And I don't mean that in a sense of dismissing, your
Right.
credibility in your industry. I mean, it has no bearing on what is attractive about you.
Yeah.
He's like, something about this woman is magnetic and mesmerizing, and I just want to be in her presence.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I don't mean in the kissing your butt type of way. I mean, like, he's like, God, I just feel good with her. I feel like I could create with her. I feel like I could sit and do nothing with her. And I
Hmm.
try to get women to understand that that healthy masculinity feels like just because you are who you are, he wants to know more. Not because, you can jump through hoops of fire.
Yeah.
We women are good at bringing the hoop, light it on fire, watch what I'm going to do, and diving through. And we wonder why the guy's like, oh, that's good. You're not getting the response you needed because he never needed to see that show.
Yeah.
So I know it sounds like a production of things, but honestly, I can look back on relationships where I was like, watch this. Do you know what I do? Watch how amazing I am. And oh, let me do this for him. I'm gonna cook. I'm gonna like, you're giving this whole wifey experience when you didn't do the vetting, you didn't do the
No,
the
that's right.
initial things to even make sure that you guys are on the same page fundamentally or at your core beliefs, or that you could even connect and have a future with this person
Yeah.
because of where you're coming from. If you're like wounded and, survival mode, you're just like, validate me.
Yeah, that's part of the flag, the red flag too, right? If you haven't fully vetted this person based on what you're looking for and what your standards are,
Mhm.
and that's another one of the other
Yeah.
red flag, and I think you
Tell
alluded to
me
that in
another
the
one.
beginning, is is whether or not this meets your standards of what you
Hmm.
desired, like you mentioned earlier, of
Hmm.
what um of even like of how you behave, kind of like what we were talking about like just now. Like, is
Hmm.
this what you really want? So,
Yes. And so I see women, this is where a detour happens. This is when
mm,
we're going back and maybe we're going over a relationship and, they just don't understand. I did all the things and why didn't it work out? When we go back and kind of dissect the beginning, I think the beginnings are really important. It's where you can set standards that you have. It's where you can express yourself. It's really where you are not even invested yet. So why are you not speaking your truth?
yeah,
You have no ties to this person yet. You need to speak your truth. And if it repels them, then say, good riddance. Thank you. Right.
yeah,
But what I see happen is initially when they get that little feeling of like, oh, something's off or something just is against what they would normally do. But they go, well, it's really not that bad. And maybe, he'll come around, or I just don't know enough about this. I should probably just find out more. Or this is probably an unrealistic standard I have. Let me just proceed. And they give themselves the green light. And usually we find when we go back and talk about, well, what was it about that standard that you had that you felt like you could drop it at that
mm,
moment? And they're like, oh, well, I don't know. I guess it just seems like, it wasn't that big a deal. Or maybe it wasn't that important to him. So when we go back, it's like creating that kind of your own little manual. And I don't mean it to be all restrictive, but knowing that ahead of time rather than creating it along the way really saves you a lot of
oh
time and heartbreak.
yeah, being very clear from the beginning. And also, like, I can understand in a sense because, no one's going to be perfect.
Right.
And, when you're picking a person, you're picking a set of problems. You're picking a set of issues, and, you're going to pick the ones
Hmm.
that you can deal with. And I would
Right.
say there's compensation in other ways that
Right.
really meet your standards. But
Hmm.
when you're flexing on or compromising on a big standard. And sometimes, I notice that might come from a place of thinking that it's unrealistic what you desire, or it's
Yeah.
not out there. You get discouraged, you
Mhm.
haven't found it. There are 8 billion people on the planet.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
How
out
do they
there.
say there's more fish in the sea or something like that? It's like, who told you that it being unrealistic is coming from inside of you, something you've heard. Maybe you yourself are a lazy dater and you don't really
Ooh,
want to have to
ouch. Ouch,
you don't
Jermaine.
want to put in the work to go,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to hold to my standard. I know that this exists.
Yeah.
My dream man is going to like how I look. He's not going to be like, baby, you need to lose 30 pounds before I can take you on a steak dinner, whatever. It's like, I tell women that feel like, this isn't my best body or I'm overweight. I'm like, okay, so you mean you're going to wait how about you're just in process? Why don't we all just accept that we're in process? You will meet a man that thinks you look amazing, that your energy is amazing. But if you don't feel that way, that's what comes across to them.
Mm.
You come off as like, oh God, I'm insecure about I know I need to lose a couple. Stop it. Stop it. We're showing up to the date as who we are. We're wearing what we chose. Our hair is the way we wanted it, the outfit we wanted to put on. We are coming out of that I need to impress you energy. I think that is so important to let you just lean back and be like, ugh,
Yeah, and just that pressure
standard.
that can remove off yourself of
Mm-hmm.
thinking it has to be perfect and
Mm-hmm.
to look a certain way. I have to be all
Mm-hmm.
healed in a certain way. Of course,
Right.
like you want to do the work,
Right.
but at the end of the day, like a lot of the work's going to happen while you're dating, while you're in the relationship, and it's not going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to stop.
It is not. I mean, I think we're just always evolving. So dating just happens to be one of those things that the more you are self aware and very clear on what it is you want, the shorter that time is to vet people, I feel like. I think you're going to be able to identify quicker that, ooh, this is a no for me. I mean, we're on the far ends of this with each other. He might be the most drop dead gorgeous thing. You went out with him, you have a great time. This is where women, we get swept away in the
Yeah.
experience of it all. The lights, the shiny, right? It was so great. We had the best time. He was so handsome. He smelled so good. Oh my God, he's 6'4", all the things.
Yeah.
However, you want to have 4 kids and he wants none. You
Yeah.
were divorced and want to remarry. And he's like, oh, I'm never getting married again. Like, you got to pay attention to these things
Yeah.
because he can be as handsome as I won't even say because there's some hunks out there, but it's like that can't be that's like in your 20%, like your
Yeah.
80/20. He
Yeah.
looks like this or he's this tall. You want a guy who's 6'4" and this guy is 6'2". Really? You're gonna throw him back? I'm just saying. I think you have to really be aware and clarify they're usually the issues that would help you connect with someone. That's how I look at it.
Mm.
How tall somebody is has nothing to do with how you're going to connect with them. If it does, we need to talk. But I mean, if you want kids and they don't, if you are very, spiritual and you like go to church twice a week and this person's like, oh, there is no God. I mean, you guys might have some issues. So really just not sweeping under the rug and having that standard. I don't even know which red flag we were on by now. There's just so many.
Yeah. What's your next? Do you have another one? I have a
Mhm.
final one that I'm going to save,
Um,
but I want to see where we are down your list.
mm, I would say, since lately I'm talking to a lot of women about dating
Yeah.
and they're, talking about those first few dates and the subject of exes always comes up.
Oh,
And to me, one of the red flags I've experienced, many people that I talk to have experienced when it comes time to talk about the ex. Is it always necessary? I think it's debatable.
yeah.
But when that man refers to all of his exes as the problem
Mm.
to, if they had done something differently, things would have worked out. All of the turmoil, chaos, and basically ending of the relationship was due to her. I think that is a red flag. How he talks about his last relationship, because we know it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
Um, you don't have a sense that he's taking accountability or learned anything or has evolved from that relationship. It was all her. And if she wouldn't have been crazy or hadn't done X, Y, and Z, I feel like you will soon be the topic of that same discussion with him. When you all don't work out, whether it's one date or seven, he will be explaining, if he had told you about, talked about you to somebody, what happened to that girl? And they're going to say, what happened to that hot girl? Right? They're like, oh man, she wanted too much, or they'll come up with something. But basically, the red flag, the way they speak about the exes, or anytime they feel things are going wrong and they victimize themselves. Sometimes this might not be about the ex, it might be about why they're not where they want to be in life, or the job that they work, or their boss, or if he's like a complainer and if the world would just change, I could get what I want. Girl, you need to run. You need to run.
Yeah, I had a
An
woman I was talking
empowered
to
man
who,
does not speak this way. Not that he wasn't with the crazy ex, but it's just
yeah,
choose to spend a lot of time on that, and he will tell you how he's evolved or maybe what he could have done differently. There's an awareness about him, not a victim mentality.
absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a common one. I was just talking to a woman recently and she was talking about the negativity, and that was something right away that turned her off, right? It brought up
Hmm.
the red flag. It's like,
Hmm. Why do you think it turned her off? Why do you think it's seen as a turn off?
like especially for a man to be kind of like in the victim mode, like I think part of
Mhm.
it too is, you know, we we want to like, I don't even know what to say to that one. You threw a curveball my way.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
I was just curious. Like, some people are turned off. Sorry, I think I have green drink in my teeth. Some people are turned off, and other people move into that mothering mode.
To
I'm just
save
like,
them, like I guess, like to try to, yeah, save. Yeah.
hmm. But I think, like you were saying previously about having a standard, and you always talk to when I'm watching your content about boundaries, both external and internal. I
Hmm.
think it's your internal boundaries too that make you like turned off or want to proceed as like, he needs help.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not laughing because
Well, I know
I'm
for her,
laughing
like,
because this used to be me. Like, he needs me to
yeah.
help him. What can I do to fix it for you? I feel like it can bring that out in a woman. Or if you're already moving with boundaries and standards and you know what you can and can't move forward with and create and be in your feminine energy, I think you're going to be like, ooh.
Well, I think, and she had a history of attracting men like this too. And I think after, at the beginning, she would mother, she would go into
Mhm,
it and try to kind of like save these people, right? And have this like
mhm.
savior complex and everything. And after a while, like it just wasn't working anymore. Like it just
Yeah,
wasn't,
because it's
it's like,
exhausting.
yeah,
I was talking to a woman the other day about that, and I'm like, you can be this performing, mothering, let me solve it all. I always use the expression build a bear. We don't want to build a bear. We don't want to have to tap here, twist there. Now, that is not to say, I always have to add my disclaimer because some people think, oh my gosh, she's just so hardcore. It is that. It's that when we're in that mode, we can't rest in feminine energy because we're still trying to control and fix and let me twist, hand me a hammer. Okay, wrench. Like, we don't want to do that. And to me, that is a quality, a trait of feminine men. And a lot of people think, I'm feminine. I'm not talking about that woman vibe from a man. I'm talking
No,
about that lack of empowerment they have, that completely absent need to lead or provide or secure, uplift, and
yeah,
be that support for you. You don't find that there, but I find with
that's the
healthy, they don't do that.
yeah, yeah, and that's it's funny because when I got the curveballs, like I'm trying to position it. How do I want to say it with
Yes, and I was asking because
the
I'm always
tone?
curious how your perspective
And
on things. And when you deal with a client or you're talking to ladies and they tell you, oh, something's a turn off, because to say something is a turnoff to me is a woman is pretty solid in her thought
yeah.
or something about her internal vibe. It doesn't feel aligned with him or his behavior, but there's a reason behind that. That's why I
Oh,
was
yeah.
curious, like,
It's funny because that reminds me once I was dating this guy and
oh, I
he
love
did
hearing
something.
your dating stories from back in the day.
Going back to like the whole intuition and just being turned off by something.
Hmm.
So super nice guy, had a lot of like on the checklist things,
Hmm.
but there was always something that he would do that would bother me. And I think it was definitely like back then I didn't know about healing and trauma and all stuff like that. It was definitely a
Hmm.
trauma response of some sort that I didn't dig
Hmm.
into it. I mean, we were in our 20s, like
Right, right.
we were in a different, it
We
was a
were
different
throwing
world.
caution to the wind back then. What? Intuition?
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
And but I walked away and then I
Mhm,
was like, oh shoot, did I make the wrong decision?
mhm,
Guy gave
mhm,
me another chance, gave it a second chance. No, my intuition came back up, the standard came back up, that red
mhm,
flag, you
mhm,
know, came back.
mhm,
And that's one of the reasons I feel it's so important to really listen to your intuition. And you know what? Sometimes there are just going to be things that bother you and you can't put your
mhm,
finger on it. And I don't
mhm.
think love is always so crystal clear and,
Absolutely not.
binary and like, yes, no, you know, there is a layer there that you can set your standards and your expectations and your list all you want,
Mhm,
but there might be another element in there that you can't even describe, can't even explain that
mhm.
might
You can't even put your finger on why it bothers you.
no.
And sometimes I have told women, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't really have to justify why it feels like a no. And they're like, but and I think just culturally, women have been raised that way too. Like, well, we need to explain ourselves.
Yeah,
But
people please.
intuition is not, I think this might be my favorite red flag that we've talked about
Yeah.
today because it varies so much. It has the same function, but what kicks it in, I don't want to say kicks it in for all intents and purposes, what's gonna wake it up in you. I think that your intuition is like your GPS, right? If
Yeah.
your GPS says, go left, there's a bridge ahead. I mean, if you're driving in your car, do you just drive through the construction and go off the bridge? Well, no, unless it's buffering.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're buffering, right? Is this a red flag or I know we're talking about red flags because that is something that term people can relate to, but honestly, your red flags aren't going to be the same as your girlfriend's because her
Yeah.
intuition might say, ooh, this guy's a provider because X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to proceed forward. And your intuition might again say, we've been here before, and something about his behavior, provider or not, is a no for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important for women to know that your intuition is your own. There isn't really a right red flag or green flag. That's why the work we do with women helps them kind of dive deeper into their own standards, get clear on what they need, what is, non-negotiable for you. That's why sometimes you got to just put your blinders on and ask yourself, what am I looking for in a relationship?
Yeah.
What do I need?
Love it. And I think this is a great way to wrap up this chat, going back to the intuition, going full
Mhm.
circle.
I love talking about intuition
I
because
know.
it just can't be explained and it doesn't have to be.
No. And I love our little chat like this. We'll have to do it again.
Mhm.